Education covers somewhere around 45 to 50 years. I think within the last year, teachers have taken more abuse publicly from politicians, from newspaper writers, radio announcers, and I'm here to tell you that some of the best people I've ever worked with in my life are school teachers. I've worked with them for 40 or 50 years. They don't deserve that kind of abuse. We have some excellent people that go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning and come home at 11 o'clock at night. And then when you turn on the radio, they tell you how you stink and how terrible you are and how you steal the money and things like that. It doesn't make you feel very good. So if you get a chance before you leave this evening, walk up to a teacher and shake their hand and tell them thank you, because that means all the world to them. Let's have a hand with me. I can remember back when I was here last time, I was winding down the road, I couldn't find school. Today I came down and I saw this big blue roof. I said, oh, there it is. Right over on the side. You've doubled the size of the building, you've doubled your population, and you're doing an excellent job. I'm supposed to tell you some stories about the movement. But before I do that, let me tell you a story about my family. I was born about 10 miles down the road. How many people know where Kingston is? I was born in Kingston, New Jersey. Right on Route 27. I lived with my grandparents. Why did I live with my grandparents? Because my mother was a sleep-in domestic in Princeton. And my father worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs. And in order for me to be taken care of, I went to live with my grandparents. My father had an education up to the 4th grade. My mother had an education up to the 9th grade. But we were a family. We were a family. Were we poor? Yeah, we were poor. We were dirt poor. I tell a story about, this is a joke, this is not reality. I tell a story, somebody said, how poor were you? I said, Christmas Eve, my father went outside and fired a shotgun in the air. Came back inside and told me Santa Claus committed suicide. But you want to know something? During those years, it finally dawned on me what made a family. We had love. We had food, we had clean clothes, and we had each other. Did I ever go hungry? No. Did I ever worry about what kind of clothes I was wearing? No. And for you young people, I can tell you that from the time I was, early as I can remember, it was instilled in our mind that school didn't stop after 12th grade. That you were going to go to college. You had to get an education. You had to go on and get a college education because the job market, in order to compete the economy, you want to get yourself qualified. My father went on, as I say, he worked 2 or 3 jobs. He used to come in the morning, I'd see him for about 2 minutes, and all of a sudden he's gone again. He drove a taxi cab, he cleaned Nassau Inn, tap room, and then he worked as a janitor at Princeton University. But he always found time to stick his head in the door and say hello, hey everyone, how's everything gone? He always found time to get in his car and drive up to my grandmother's house on Sunday and take me for a ride in his car. That was our time. He came out and picked me up and we only rode about 2 miles, but that was my 2 miles. That was my time that I spent with my father. So parents, you got to understand that it's important. It's not how much time, it's the quality of the time that you spend with your family. I went on to college, I came out of high school, I went on to college, I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to be a football coach. Football was my thing. I wanted to be a football coach. At the time, the movement had just started in the 60s. I came out of college in 1957. 2 years after I came out of college, the movement became big. It was my first venture into finding out what life in America is all about. One summer, a friend of mine said, "Hey, we got a bunch of people going down on the bus. We're going down to Mississippi and see if we can register voters." To me, it was a chance to get on the bus and take a bus ride. I said, "Okay, fine. When do we leave?" You know, we got on the bus, and if you've never been in the South, people, I'm telling you this story so young people, you can understand what it was like back then. Back in that time, number one, there were a lot of restaurants you could eat in. You can walk in, don't go in. They're not yours. Back in those days, if you got on a bus in the South, you went and sat in the back. If you're going to sit in the back, they put you off the bus. And then the bus got filled in the front and got to the back, and you had to stand up and let them sit down. There was a time when people didn't call you Mr. or Mrs. They called you boy, and they called you by your first name. So here I am getting on this bus and I'm going down south, and I'm not sure what to expect. We get down south and we got involved in town, and you got to understand that the people in a lot of those southern towns were afraid to have minorities register to vote. They were afraid because minorities in that particular town outnumbered them. So if you got them to vote, they had a majority and they could run the town. So when we got down there, obviously we were looked at like the last piece of pie on a plate. We walked around, we went to farms, we had sharecroppers, we tried to get them out. I can remember we registered, the first week we were there, we registered 300 voters. We were down in Laurel, Mississippi. The second week, back in those days, they made you take a cold test. If you took people in to register to vote, they gave you a test. And you had to pass the test to come down to vote. And obviously the test was slanted, so you weren't going to pass it. So we got smart, and we stole some of the tests. So when we get the people and bring them in to vote, we're in the car trying to teach them what the answers are. We're riding one day, all of a sudden look in the rearview mirror, and there's a couple of farmers following us in a pickup truck. And we had a lady in the car, she had to be in her late 70s, and she kept looking. She got nervous, and she asked us to take her home. The guy in the truck behind us was the guy that owned our property. So we kept going. We kept riding and going downtown to get to the restaurant. As we're going down, all of a sudden we hear shotgun going on. And in the back window, the guy took the shotgun out of the truck window and he's firing a shotgun in the air. Now we're saying, well, what are we going to do? If we stop there, they'll shoot us. If we speed up, they'll shoot her. We finally got downtown, and reluctantly, she went in, she registered to vote. When she came out, the farmer gave her a month to evacuate her house. A month to leave. That's what it was back in those days. The first time I ever got arrested, first and only time I ever got arrested, was on another venture down south. We were sitting in a restaurant, the Woolworths, 5 and 10. That's why to this day I don't go in any Woolworths, 5 and 10 cent store. I don't go in. I stay away from it. We decided we were going to go in and sit at a lunch counter. And we sat there, and sat there for 9 hours. And all of a sudden, the waitress came down and she said, "I'm sorry, we can't serve you." She didn't say it that way, but that's what she said. We can't serve you here. So we said, well, we're going to sit here and wait. We waited for about a half an hour, and all of a sudden, the people that were in it working in there, we saw them leaving. We saw them leaving, and as they're leaving, you look out the window and you see some police cars coming. So I'm saying to myself, well, something's going to happen. Either they're going to beat us or we're in trouble. Police officers came in and asked us to leave. We didn't leave. They walked up, they put tear gas bombs in the what do you call it, lunch counter. And we sat there crying like babies, and when we couldn't take the tear gas anymore, we got up and ran out. As we ran out the door, they put us in handcuffs and took us to jail. Because we weren't supposed to do that. Back in those days, people don't understand how big a man Martin Luther King was. What people don't understand is Martin Luther King stood for non-violence. I was present and heard him speak a number of times. A number of times. And I don't know how many people understand this. Martin Luther King patterned his delivery and patterned his style after Mahatma Gandhi. How many people know who Mahatma Gandhi was? He was the man that Martin Luther King patterned his style of pure non-violence. His favorite phrase was, we're going to live together as brothers or die separate as fools. But we want to take the time to get to understand each other. But King was a man who knew how to read. He had a vision. He had a vision. And if you ever have an opportunity to read any of his writings, take the time to read them and understand where he was coming from. The last march I can talk about, I was involved in the 1965 March for Selma, Montgomery. Now, the first two marches, I wasn't there. The first two marches got stopped by fire hoses, got stopped by any number of under-the-table tackles. I was in Stamford, Connecticut at the time. I was teaching in Stamford, and I was a member of the town council. And I was a representative to go down to Selma for the final march. This experience that changed my life. When we got to Selma the night before the march, they had a meeting in the church basement. And for the first time, I was trying to figure out what was going to happen, because that whole meeting was based on how do you react? How do you react? If they turn the doors loose on you, this is what you're going to do. If they put the hoses on you, this is what you're going to do. If you hear bombs going off in the night, cherry bombs, this is what you do. The whole evening. But above all, it's nonviolent. The second part of that story, which I think is important, is that in that meeting and in that march, there were about 350 people in that march that marched the whole way. And in that 350 people, we don't understand. A lot of us don't understand this. But there were as many non-black people involved in that march as there were black. It was a feeling of a group of people, an attitude of, we're not going to take this anymore. I don't care what you say or how you do it. You're not going to stop us. We started walking the next morning and had left one over the bridge and headed toward Montgomery. But what it called the National Guard, you think it was Memorial Day parade. We had National Guard on both sides of the road. We had trucks in front of us, trucks in back of us. But still, people would break through the barrier, spit at you, call you names. And I can remember thinking to myself, how can people hate? How can they hate somebody? They don't even know me. They have no idea who I am. How can they hate? But for them, it was a way of life. I can remember the first, at night, they took the National Guard trucks and they parked in a big circle. And then we stepped inside the circle. We had to sleep back, put the sleeping bags down. And every night, like, the movement, as you well know, was founded on music. There was a lot of singing, a lot of spirituals, a lot of emotional talking. That's the first time I heard Dr. King speak. Dr. King had a presence about him. When he got up to speak, people automatically got quiet. And to prove he was nonviolent, I'll tell you, and this goes into the story. If he would have been a violent man, I'll tell you right now. On the March on Washington, when Mahalia Jackson got finished singing in the upper room, if he'd have pointed at the Capitol room and said, "Take it," they'd have tore it down apart. The man was nonviolent. He talked about it at night. He talked about it all the way through. But we had 3 campouts that night going into Montgomery. The last night we were out, this is a funny story, but when I tell you the story, next time you see some pictures of the 65 Selma March, take a look at it. The night before we were winding up the march, we had a rumor that they were going to assassinate Dr. King. That when we went into the city limits, they were going to put snipers on the roof and they were going to shoot. And we had a short meeting, like a revival meeting, that night like we had every day. And Dr. King said, he came back. He didn't make the remarkable walk, but he came back that night. And he said to me, not me, he said to us, he's not afraid of that. And he talked a little bit, hadn't been on the mountain, what he was talking about when he got shot. He thought that he was going to die and he didn't die. So he said, I've been on the mountaintops, so it doesn't bother me. And always remember, it's not the quantity of your life, it's the quality of your life. It's not how old you are, it's how you live those years. So the next morning, to combat the sniper, and there's a little humor in everything, they decided in the march that they were going to dress all the people that were marching in front in the same outfit. All got black suits on, they all got black ties, and it was done on purpose. And the reasoning behind it is that they can't tell one from the other. So we dressed the first 2 or 3 rows all the way, and sniper can't pick out who it is. So if you ever see any pictures, you'll notice that the first 2 or 3 rows going in, they're all dressed alike. People, it's an experience that molded my life. It made me believe in family. It made me believe in education. It made me understand how important education is. And to you young people today, let me say this very clearly. Respect your parents. Respect them. Your parents, they wake you up in the morning, they feed you, they put clothes on your back, and don't ask for anything in return but real love. Respect your parents. The big change today, everybody's in a hurry. Take time to sit down and talk to your parents. And be positive. Dare to be different. When I was small, I had a coach. I sat on the tail end of the bench when I was a freshman in high school playing football, and they put the worst uniform they had in a locker room on me. And then, so I wouldn't be embarrassed, they gave me a big poncho to put on. So I didn't look good. So here I am at 9:30 sitting on the end of the bench. I was happy, but I knew where I wanted to go. I had a vision, I knew where I wanted to go, I knew what I wanted to do. Too many of our young people today, you don't have that vision. Dr. King used to say all the time, dream. Dream about what you want to do and where you want to go. And when you dream, have the guts to work hard to make that dream come true. You can't dream and sit on your earth, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Let me finish up by telling you about my family. Forgive me for doing this, but my mother and father were the two biggest people in my life. Non-educated, very smart, and my father would have had the same opportunities I had. My father was president of Wall Street. He knew how to make a dollar, he knew how to work. He worked three, not one, not two, three jobs. Three jobs. My mother, Vanessa, we saw her on Thursday. Thursday night was her night off. She came home, spent the night with us on Thursday, and all of a sudden she went back and stayed at her job. Cooking the meals, cleaning, making beds, and all that kind of stuff. But as I said to you before, there was always that feeling that even though we were poor, even though we had a lot of unity and a lot of determination, our parents gave us a lot of support. They made us appreciate what education was. They made us appreciate what education was. My father died at 97 years old. At the time of my father's death, my father owned his own taxi business. He owned 6 homes in Princeton. And if you know anything about Princeton real estate, you know what I'm talking about. He owned 6 homes in Princeton. And still, was running back and forth, trying to clean the temple in Nassau Tavern. I had a brother and 2 sisters. Coming from my 2 parents, my brother was the 3rd black to go to Princeton University. Graduated from Princeton University with honors. Went to Harvard Medical School. Graduated from Harvard Medical School with honors. Was the chief of surgery at Strong Memorial Hospital.